Mein Name ist Eduard Albert Meier, genannt.
My name is Edward Albert Meier, but all around the world I am simply called Billy. I received the name in Tehran when I was on the road, and since then this name has remained with me.
Billy Meier is a soon-to-be 70-year-old man living in Switzerland. Meier has one arm, lost his arm in about 1905. He started to take photographs of UFOs in 1964. He claims that his first contact with extraterrestrials took place when he was only a 5-year-old boy.
That there is more photographic evidence and video evidence for this particular case than any other existing case. And it's almost so good that you're just like, holy cow.
Using the very same film the skeptic refers to, we can see that the UFO does indeed partially go behind the hill. Since the hill is some distance from the camera, perhaps a quarter mile, it's impossible that the UFO is a small model. I personally showed Meier's UFO photos and films to the owners of the company that won the Academy Award for Special Effects. When I asked them if these were models, these photos and films, they said, no, we know models and those aren't models. I asked, can you duplicate Meier's films? And they said, if we could, we'd have to go to CGI. And I reminded them that in 1976 and 78, there was no Photoshop, no CGI, and no home computers.
I once made recordings of the whirring sounds of Semyaze's beam ship.
In the original preliminary investigation report done on this case, 8 different sound engineers had the opportunities to analyze the sounds on oscilloscopes and spectrum analyzers. These included 3 different laboratories, including U.S. Naval Undersea Labs. They could find no sound source of record that could produce these sounds. In 1958, Meier sent to the 25 European countries about 115, 120 specific predictions. The United States of America will be engaged in 2 wars with Iraq. The second war will be conducted under a president who is the son of a former president. The second war will lead to an unbelievable disaster. Perhaps the most startling of what I call the prophetically accurate information in the Meier case pertains to Meier's astronomical information about numerous planets, but especially Jupiter, its rings, its moons. Meier specifically said that Io is the most volcanically active body in the solar system. He published that 5 months before we discovered it. More than a year after he published the information on a ring of Jupiter being composed of ionized sulfur particles, Science magazine published that information in January of 1980. The skeptics would like us to believe that this man, with no resources, working as a night watchman and on a partial disability pension, with one hand, is not only a master model maker, filmmaker, photographer, digital and special effects person, videographer, metallurgist, electronics genius, sound recording engineer, knowledgeable about topography and map making, geography, ancient history, mining, ores, agriculture, and 30 other disciplines that he's brought to bear in terms of the information in this case. They will credit him with that, but they won't say, hey, the guy's telling the truth, he's the one that's meeting with these people.
One of the things that really shocked the Allied forces during World War II was the technology possessed by the Germans. The V-2 rocket, basically a 1940s version of most any modern intercontinental ballistic missile, was at least 30 years ahead of what every other government had available. German aircraft were the first to use swept-wing technology, despite the fact that we're told such aircraft cannot fly in a stable manner without computers, which did not exist in a form that could be placed aboard aircraft in the 1940s. According to the U.S. Army's official history of World War II, some German planes even used television and radar-guarded weapons. The Germans were the first to fly jets and the only ones to use them during World War II. Some were made of exotic composite material, carefully held in place by special radar-absorbing glue. America's B-2 stealth bomber bears a striking resemblance to some of the German jets of World War II and is assembled in much the same way. But those jets were assembled and flown in the 1940s. The question is, how did Germany, which had been forced to disarm after World War I, develop so much technology in such a short period of time? The answer is, they may have had help. German plans for saucer-shaped craft found and examined after World War II by the Allied intelligence services suggest that the Germans may have had access to one or more crashed UFOs which had gone down somewhere in Germany at a much earlier date. The circular craft, which Germany never had time to actually produce that we know of, would have been powered by a sophisticated gravity drive using powerful magnetic fields. Was Germany able to glean enough technology from crashed UFOs to jump ahead of the rest of the world in electronics, engineering, and weaponry? Considering the fact that the United States spent the next 30 years after World War II ended relearning and copying what Germany already knew in terms of technology, the answer might just be yes.
If the United States government somehow was inexplicably unaware of the existence of extraterrestrial life up to the 1950s, then on July 29, 1952, they would be forced to concede the issue when a squadron of UFOs overflew the Capitol. The Washington National Airport sightings were not just a single night of UFO flyovers. From July 12th to July 29th, the Capitol was buzzing with UFO activity on a nightly basis. On July 19th at 11:40 p.m., Air Traffic Controller Edward Nugent spotted several craft 15 miles southwest of the Capitol. There were no scheduled aircraft in the area, and these craft were not flying any established flight paths. He wrote in his report that their movements were completely radical compared to those of ordinary aircraft. Other controllers in the area confirmed the radar blips and observed the orange ball-type UFOs outside their windows. The story made front-page headlines and alarmed the Truman administration. The president himself personally called Captain Edward J. Rupert, the supervisor of the Air Force's Project Blue Book investigation into the UFO mystery, and asked for an explanation of the sightings. The president was told it was a temperature inversion. However, the Air Force placed several jet pilots on nationwide alert with orders to shoot down any UFO that ignores orders to land. To this day, there is no explanation for this incident. The government accepted the weather-related explanation because it was easy to tell this to the public, rather than admit they knew the craft were alien in origin.
CBS was making a special documentary about the UFO phenomenon in 1973. Veteran news anchor Walter Cronkite was approached with the idea. Though the program was to be hosted by several CBS News reporters, Cronkite would do the interviews. By 1973, I'd already been investigating UFOs for several years. As it happened, Walter Cronkite read a small piece that I wrote for a now-defunct UFO publication about the Air Force cover-up of UFO information. Cronkite was making a list of people he wanted to interview for the CBS special, and the article interested him. In September of 1973, I received a letter from CBS News indicating their interest in my work. After a few phone calls, I was actually able to meet and speak with the man himself. On a cool New York City day in late September, I sat down and had an informal lunch with Walter Cronkite. As we lunched, Cronkite told me about the TBS special and indicated that he might want to interview me. He wanted a younger person's perspective on the phenomenon. Most of the UFO researchers in those days were older and had taken up the topic as a retirement project. Cronkite was especially interested in some of the Air Force stories I'd collected about the cover-up. After about 30 minutes of back-and-forth conversation, Cronkite said to me, "Let me tell you my UFO story." For the next 5 minutes, I sat in stunned silence as he told me what had happened. In the 1950s, Cronkite was part of a pool of news reporters brought out to a small South Pacific island to watch the test of a new Air Force missile. The reporters had been warned that photography and audio recordings were forbidden. They would have to give a written account of the event. As Air Force security personnel walked around the perimeter of the test area with guard dogs and the news reporters watched, the missile fired up and was about to be released. Just then, a large disc-type UFO appeared on the scene. Cronkite guessed that the object was about 50 to 60 feet in diameter, a dull gray color, and had no visible means of propulsion. Because the noise of activity around him and the missile engine was so loud, he couldn't tell whether the disc made any noise. He didn't notice any coming directly from the object. As Air Force guards ran toward the UFO with their dogs, the disc hovered about 30 feet off of the ground. It suddenly sent out a blue beam of light which struck the missile. It also struck a guard and a dog at the same time. The missile was frozen in midair about 70 feet from the launcher as it had taken off, and the guard was frozen in mid-step and a dog frozen in midair as he jumped at the disc. Cronkite reminded me that all this happened within a very short space of time, probably about 5 minutes or less. Suddenly, the missile exploded. After that, the disc vanished. The guard and dog looked all right, but were quickly taken away by medical personnel. At the same time, guards rapidly ushered the reporters into a concrete observation bunker. After about 30 minutes of sitting in that hot box, they were brought out into the air again and addressed by an Air Force colonel. The officer told them it was all part of the test. Obviously making it up as he went along, the colonel said the event was staged to test media reaction to UFOs. He reinforced the usual line to the reporters that flying saucers were probably not extraterrestrial, but what people were actually seeing was secret planes being tested by the Air Force. This test was designed to show the media how shocking it could be to suddenly view a new technology. Well, Cronkite was certain that what he viewed was indeed a new technology, but he was also sure it was not an earthly one. He didn't believe the Air Force explanation then, and he didn't believe it at the time that he told me the story.
In the early 1950s, astronaut Gordon Cooper was assigned to a jet fighter group in Germany. While stationed there, he remembers very vividly the weak and entire formation of circular objects passed over the airbase on an almost daily routine. But that's not all. While a project manager at Edwards Air Force Base, just 3 years before entering America's space program, Cooper had assigned a team of photographers to an area of the vast dry lake beds near Edwards. The former astronaut disclosed that while the crew was deployed, they spotted a strange-looking craft above the lake bed, and they began filming it. Cooper says the object was very definitely hovering above the ground, and then it slowly came down and sat on the lake bed for a few minutes. During this time, the motion picture cameras were filming. There were varied estimates by the cameraman on what the actual size of the object was, but they all agreed that it was at least the size of a vehicle that would carry normal-sized people in it. Colonel Cooper was not fortunate enough to be outside at the time of this incredible encounter, but he did see the films as soon as they were rushed through the development process. It was a typical circular-shaped UFO, he recalls. Not too many people saw it because it took off at quite a sharp angle and just climbed straight on out of sight. Where are these films today? Why would Gordon Cooper, a respected and honorable American hero, make up such a story? According to him, UFOs were seen regularly at Edwards Air Force Base. Perhaps the most damning evidence that the United States was actively participating in a government cover-up comes from Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso. Corso was the chief of the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk in Army Research and Development, working under Lieutenant General Arthur Trudeau. And he was on the staff of President Eisenhower's National Security Council for 4 years between 1953 and 1957. In his book, The Day After Roswell, Corso claims that technology gleaned from the Roswell crash helped kickstart technological advancements in accelerated particle beam devices, fiber optics, lasers, integrated circuit chips, and Kevlar material. Corso's duties at the Pentagon required him to oversee the storage of physical evidence and files on the Roswell crash, and to leak this material to corporations for the advancement of our technology. Corso also claimed the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars, was meant to achieve the destructive capacity of electronic guidance systems in incoming enemy warheads, as well as disabling enemy spacecraft, including those of extraterrestrial origin.
Some of the most compelling evidence that UFOs are here and hail from somewhere else comes from encounters involving the military itself. One such encounter involves the USS FDR. Crewman Kester Grzinski describes what happened. In the year 1958, we were on a shakedown cruise when there was a small light that was following our ship. Then the light came right up to us. It came in close enough to us so that you could see the shape of the object and also see that there were figures inside of it. The impression that I got was that those figures were not human beings. I was down below when I was told to go up topside to see something strange. So I went up and couldn't believe my eyes. I saw a bright white ball of light. It headed straight for us, getting bigger and bigger. It was spherical, about 75 to 100 feet long. It turned red-orange, and I could feel the heat on my face. I could see silhouettes of figures looking at us. They had no features, and you could tell they weren't human. Then the bottom turned cherry red, and it vanished in a flash. Soon after the incident, crew members who talked about it were transferred. Then the CIA came on board to investigate a so-called gambling problem. It was a massive cover-up, notes Grzinski. There was no gambling.